I'm a South Indian and my best friend is a North Indian. About 10 years ago when we just became friends, I asked him where he was from and he said, I come from the north. So I asked him, let me guess, are you from the state of Bihar? And he said, bhai koi bhi gali de dena, bas Bihari mat bolna. Which literally translates to, you can swear at me and call me names, just don't call me a Bihari or someone who comes from the state of Bihar. Now back then I was too young to understand why being Bihari was considered to be an insult, but now I get it. And when you hear this story, you will too. Back in 2022, in Amiyawar, a village in Bihar, there was a 60 feet long old unused bridge. 5 men stole it. How on earth do you steal a bridge? That's Bihar for you. If you rank Indian states and union territories in terms of poverty and illiteracy, Bihar ranks number 1. Its net state domestic product is just $1,000 or 1/3 India's national average. As a result, poverty and crime are rife in Bihar. A 10th grader got shot by his classmate for refusing to cheat on an exam. You might have heard that phrase, India is not for beginners. Now, I don't know how true that is, but Bihar is definitely not for beginners. In fact, Bihar is not for anyone. It is uninhabitable. Things in Bihar are so bad that Bihari or the B word is deemed to be an insult. So the question needs to be asked, how on earth did it get so bad? Let's answer that with the help of data and evidence. So many people would hate me for saying this, but do you know what the biggest issue is? Not just with people from Bihar, but Indians at large. The first step to solving a problem is accepting that we have one. And in India, we never seem to be doing that. In this case, we aren't willing to accept that there is something fundamentally wrong with our poorest state, and there is evidence for this as well. In 2025, a government school teacher from Bihar made a video talking about how the state has a civic sense problem. Now, instead of talking about how it got so bad or investigating the school and its neighborhood, the teacher was fired from her job for defaming the great state of Bihar. Let's take a look at what she defamed. She was posted in a school in Jahanabad where just 1 year before she made that video, the government tried to improve rural connectivity by building a bunch of roads. Now the locals here stole one of those under construction roads. How do you steal a road? Even before the road could dry, the people scooped up all the material just to sell it elsewhere for a few hundred rupees. Over the past 3 decades, 200 ponds were stolen in Bihar. Now how do you steal a pond? You fill it up with concrete so you could encroach that land. And remember that bridge that was stolen? Well, that wasn't in Jahanabad, but there was another 80-foot bridge in Jahanabad which was stolen. It's not defamation if it's a fact. The situation in Bihar is so bad that being referred to as someone from Bihar has become an insult, and as an Indian, this is absolutely saddening. Bihar was once known to be the seat of the Magad kingdom. It housed the Nalanda University. It was the place where Gautam Buddha attained enlightenment, and now Bihar is rife with poverty. And this is not your ordinary poverty, this is the final boss. There is no economic activity, adequate opportunity or education in Bihar, and I have data to back this. Back in 2022, according to a government survey, 34% of Biharis earned less than 6,000 rupees a month. That is half the minimum wage in most states in India. 96% of its residents do not possess a vehicle, and it has consistently ranked number 1 as India's poorest state. Naturally, poverty means you cannot afford an education, and that too is reflected in the data. Only 9.2% of the state's residents have finished 12th grade. 6.4% of them have been to college. The employment and education scenario is so bad here that people have no choice but to compete for government positions. At a time where states are cutting down government positions, Bihar seems to be increasing them because the youth here has no other employment avenues. And you know another problem? To apply for a government job, you need a basic education. And to get a basic education, you need either an educational infrastructure or the funds. And as a result, in Bihar back in 2009, more than 100,000 people forged fake degrees to apply for government jobs. In such a situation where people are too poor to study and there is zero economic activity in their neighborhood to find a basic job, they either resort to a life of crime or they migrate. The business environment of Bihar is terrible as a consequence of the legal and political systems there, and a founder who set up shop for his semiconductor company in the state called it the worst decision of his life. Anyway, more on this later. We can see the lack of opportunity and the helplessness of the Bihari youth in the state's migration trends. More than 50% of its households are exposed to migration. More than 90% of the country's seasonal migrants come from Bihar. And these aren't like the migrant workers in Mumbai or Bangalore that come with great education and work in IT or finance. These people work in the sweltering heat in the construction sector. They work as your house help, as the delivery partner that gets you your stuff in the heavy rains. They clean your sewers. All of it to send a meager 26,020 rupees back home. That's the average annual, keep in mind annual, not monthly, remittance that the Bihari migrant sends back home to his family. Less than $300. Simply put, the situation in Bihar is so messed up that a person would do a dehumanizing job if it meant escaping the misery of that state. But wait, how did it get so bad? Why is there no economic activity there? Why is there no education there? There's 3 reasons. Let's break them down one by one. But before we do that, if you learned something new up until this point, please consider subscribing to the channel. The first reason, as always, is the British. Back in the 1700s, the colonizers passed the Permanent Settlement Act. Under this law, all the tax that was collected from India remained fixed forever. So no matter what your income was, the tax that you paid to the British government would remain fixed. So now, if productivity went down and incomes went down, you would still have to part with the same tax amount. And that's exactly what happened. Because most people in the eastern parts of India, where Bihar was also located, were making money from farming. As productivity went down and farming incomes went down, the tax that was collected remained constant, and as a result, many farmers became landless. They didn't earn enough money to cover these taxes, and under the Permanent Settlement Act, their lands were taken away by the zamindars who were put in place by the British to enforce these laws. So now, pre-independence, many farmers lost their land and became landless laborers. And post-independence, Bihar tried to execute the Land Reform Act when it became a state. But even then, a small number of wealthy farmers controlled most of the land, and a large number of landless laborers existed. Naturally, all these wealthy farmers weren't willing to let go of their land, so guess who won that political battle? The second reason behind Bihar's misery was the Indian government and its freight equalization policy. Now, Eastern India had a lot of natural resources like metals and minerals. So naturally, industrialists wanted to set up shop and build their factories in these regions. So the government saw that there were a lot of factories being concentrated in this part of the country. So the government told the industrialists that to fix this problem, we would prefer that you set up your factory elsewhere. To which the industrialist said, wouldn't that just increase my cost? Getting all the material from these eastern states to my factories would only mean I pay more for shipping. Why would I do that? So the government said, well, you don't have to pay for that shipping. Under the freight equalization policy, we would make you whole and cover that shipping cost. You just build factories elsewhere. Don't concentrate them in these eastern parts of the country. So now industrialists simply opened factories near ports that would improve their trade flow in states like Gujarat, Karnataka and Maharashtra. But do you see the bottom line? The exploitation of people and resources happens in Bihar, but the economic benefits are received in Karnataka, Maharashtra and Gujarat. And the third reason is obviously the politicians. When you look at the government systems in Bihar and rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, the score would very likely be -69. Over the past 36 years, Bihar was primarily ruined by 3 politicians: Lalu Yadav, his wife Rabri Devi and the current chief minister Nitish Kumar, all of whom only focused on divisive politics that focused on identity, caste and religion in order to stay in power and make maximum gains. Since the 1990s, Bihar hasn't seen a single major win in the field of education, development or business. But the South Asian Terrorism Portal reported 150 plus caste related casualties in the state during this period. So what exactly was the chief minister doing during this period? Lalu Yadav and his wife were embroiled in the fodder scam, wherein they were accused of stealing 940 crore rupees from the state treasury funds to purchase fodder for livestock that didn't exist. What's more messed up is that the couple was convicted for the first time in 2013, 15 years after this happened, and that too didn't result in any major punishment. They were also entangled in the railway for job scam, wherein they appointed people to the Indian Railways in exchange for land at below market prices. Also, this couple wasn't the only one abusing its power. This trend has been constant in Bihar since forever. In 2022, the Association of Democratic Reforms reported that 72% of the Bihar Bihar government cabinet had criminal cases pending against it. 53% of all ministers had serious criminal cases against them. The Bihar government allowed criminals like Muhammad Shahabuddin to operate with a free hand. This is someone who was convicted, not accused of murder and kidnapping. When the government is made up of criminals, what do you think happens to the people being governed? In the 1990s, 11.9% of all murders in India came from the state of Bihar. Over the next 10 years, this number grew to 14%. Bihar tops the list in terms of instances of attacks on police officers. Crime in Bihar, instead of decreasing, has steadily increased since 2001. Between 1992 and 2004, Bihar recorded 32,000 cases of kidnapping. In 2018, 42 girls were living at a shelter home run by an NGO in Muzaffarpur. 34 of them were sexually abused. The current Chief Minister Nitish Kumar's Social Welfare Minister Manju Verma was directly involved in this case. Guess what happened? After clearing her name, she contested elections for the same party again in 2020. Between 2016 and 2020, rapes grew 44% and murders grew 20% in Bihar. Guess what didn't grow? The people's incomes and their livelihood. These leaders took advantage of Bihar's poverty and illiteracy and focused only on populist politics that keep the population divided and the leaders in power. Even today, Bihar elects on the basis of things like religion, caste and identity. And once elected, the politicians abuse their power for personal gains by engaging in scams or collecting bribes. You can't get anything done in Bihar without paying a bribe. And this reflects clearly in Bihar's ease of doing business rankings, which is 21st out of India's 28 states, as well as the politicians' personal wealth. The average salary for an elected position in the state of Bihar is between 2 to 2.5 lakh rupees. But despite that, the asset declaration for Lalu Yadav during his most recently contested election was 3 crore rupees. It may not sound as serious, but look at this. His daughter Rohini Acharya, who contested elections in 2024, declared assets worth 36 crore rupees. Something doesn't add up, right? So you have this situation in Bihar where you cannot work because there's literally no economic activity and there is no quality education either that would help you find a better life elsewhere. So all you can do is migrate and work menial jobs. On one hand, states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh are known for producing engineers. Bihar remains known for producing cheap labor. And as a direct consequence of this ecosystem, Biharis continue to be looked at as second-class citizens. They get accused of taking away jobs from the locals and beaten up for the same. Sometimes they are beaten up for no reason, for just being Bihari. Now, in my opinion, there are 3 solutions to solve this problem. The first one is obviously to fix the law and order situation in Bihar, because no matter the tax incentives and the benefits that businesses are offered, if the law and order situation is messed up, nobody would be willing to set foot in that state. You could promise a corporation lifetime tax-free profits and they would still not come to Bihar as long as lawlessness persists. And this could only be fixed if the politicians start focusing on accountability instead of filling their own pockets. And here's a suggestion for that. You've already made your money. You're very rich now, so you might as well focus on the development and the people for a change. Second, education needs to be a priority with 100% accountability in terms of fund usage, because every year Bihar makes headlines in terms of maximum fund allocation to their education budget. But as we saw with the fodder scam, allocation doesn't mean shit if it goes into the politician's pocket. A sound education system would make sure that both employees and potential businesses stay within the state. And finally, offering business incentives like tax cuts and subsidies after these problems are fixed so businesses can willingly set up shop in Bihar. The Bihar government has tried many times to lure businesses with such benefits, but they're simply not interested as long as Bihar remains uneducated and unsafe. If you stuck around up until this point, let me know in the comments how you think this problem can be solved and how the state of Bihar can be improved. If you learned something new, subscribe.